It was supposed to be one of those quiet, perfect mornings on the lake. The sun was barely breaking through the clouds. The water was glassy, and all I could hear was the distant call of a loon. I'd just finished sealing the deck of my lakefront ranch, a place I'd been working on for months, and I was finally starting to feel proud of how it looked. No noise, no trouble, just me enjoying the calm I'd worked so hard for. But calm doesn't last long when you live a few doors down. From someone like Karen, now, you probably know the type. Always watching, always concerned, and somehow always convinced she's in charge of the neighborhood. Our HOA meetings were already tense with her there, but I never thought she'd go this far. I was halfway through putting away my tools when I saw her striding down the shoreline, phone in hand, wearing that expression that said trouble was coming. At first, I thought she was going to lecture me about some made-up HOA violation. Maybe the color of my fence, or the fact that I'd parked my truck a few feet too close to the property line last week. But instead, she went straight into a loud phone call, loud enough for me to hear every word, telling the 911 operator there was suspicious activity at my property. Suspicious. For sealing my own deck, I couldn't believe it. I just stood there, trying to figure out if she was serious or just bluffing. 10 minutes later, the sound of sirens broke the peace of the lake. 2 patrol cars pulled up, lights flashing, and the officers stepped out with that professional, cautious look. Karen marched up to them like she was delivering the case of the century. What happened next? Let's just say the conversation didn't go the way she planned. Within minutes, her smirk was gone. The officers were asking her questions she didn't seem ready to answer, and then something happened that made the whole neighborhood stop and watch. And that's where things really started to get interesting. The moment the officers started focusing on Karen instead of me, I could tell something wasn't adding up for them. One of them pulled out a small notepad, jotting things down as she stumbled over her words. She kept pointing at my house, waving her hands like she was painting some wild picture of danger. But the more she talked, the more confused the officers looked. I stayed quiet, leaning against the railing of my freshly sealed deck, just watching it all unfold. To understand why this was such a big deal, you've got to know a little about the history between Karen and me. From the day I moved into the lakefront ranch, she made it clear she didn't think I belonged here. She'd drop little comments at HOA meetings about people who don't follow the rules and keeping the neighborhood standards high. She even once left a note on my door saying my outdoor lights were too bright for the lakefront aesthetic. It was like she had made it her personal mission to find something wrong with everything I did. The truth is, this lake community has always had its share of drama. Being part of an HOA means someone's always keeping score, and Karen seemed to be the self-appointed referee. But lately, she'd been more intense, walking past my property several times a day, slowing down to peek through the fence, sometimes even taking photos. A few neighbors had noticed, but most just shrugged it off as Karen being Karen. Still, something about today felt different. Maybe it was the way she called 911 without hesitation, or maybe it was the urgency in her voice when she spoke to the operator. She wasn't just annoyed this time, she seemed almost desperate to make me look guilty. One officer stepped away to talk into his radio, while the other kept asking Karen for her ID. She resisted at first, acting offended, then reluctantly reached into her purse. I couldn't see what the officer saw when he looked at it, but his expression shifted instantly. He exchanged a glance with his partner, and in that moment, I knew there was a piece of this story I didn't understand yet, something that was about to change everything. As the officers led Karen away from my property, the neighborhood suddenly felt quieter, like everyone was holding their breath, waiting to see what would happen next. I stood there, unsure if I should feel relieved or even more on edge. The whole scene had flipped from me being the one under suspicion to Karen now looking like the problem. But why? What had the officers found that changed everything so quickly? I remembered something a neighbor had whispered to me a few days before. Apparently, Karen had a history of making false claims to get her way, things like fake complaints about noise, trespassing, and even suspicious packages. Some people thought she did it just to control the neighborhood or to settle old grudges. It was the kind of drama that made life around here complicated. But today felt different. This wasn't just another petty complaint. While Karen was being taken into the patrol car, I noticed a few other neighbors had gathered, their faces a mix of surprise and curiosity. Some shot me quick, sympathetic glances. Others looked like they were wondering what kind of storm was brewing beneath the surface. We all knew HOA rules could be strict, but this was something else entirely. Inside my head, questions raced. Had Karen been hiding something about her own background? Was this some kind of long game she'd been playing against me or others in the community? The sealed deck that started it all seemed like such a small thing, but it had cracked open a bigger story, one tangled with old rivalries and unspoken resentments. Meanwhile, the officers were talking quietly behind their cars, occasionally glancing my way. I caught bits of their conversations, something about verifying Karen's ID and checking a few records. The whole situation felt heavier than a simple HOA dispute, as the sun dipped lower over the lake. The calm I'd hoped for slipped further away. I didn't know what would come next, but one thing was clear. This wasn't just about a sealed deck or a cranky neighbor anymore. There were deeper layers here. I think the truth was still buried just beneath the surface. The night was creeping in, casting long shadows over the lakefront, and I could still hear the faint hum of the police radios as the officers finished up their conversation. My heart was pounding, not from fear exactly, but from the shock of how quickly everything had spiraled. Karen, who had seemed so confident just minutes before, was now behind the patrol car, handcuffed and silent. The neighbors who had gathered slowly started to disperse, whispering among themselves but clearly unsure what to make of what they'd just witnessed. I kept replaying the whole scene in my mind, how it all began with a sealed deck and a complaint that seemed so petty, yet ended with the cops taking Karen's ID and then arresting her. It felt like the calm facade of this lakefront neighborhood had shattered, exposing some messy, complicated truth underneath. What had they found on Karen? Was there more to her than just being the overbearing HOA Karen everyone dreaded? My phone buzzed, breaking my thoughts. It was a message from one of the neighbors who had witnessed everything. "You won't believe what I just heard from the officer," it said. The message didn't explain, just left me hanging, stirring up even more questions. I walked back inside my ranch, trying to shake off the uneasy feeling crawling up my spine. The deck, freshly sealed and still drying, looked so peaceful in the moonlight, but everything else felt anything but. Karen's accusations, the police involvement, the whispers about her past, it was all too much. Just as I was about to shut the door, I caught a glimpse of a shadow moving near the tree line behind my property. My skin prickled. Was someone watching, or had this whole situation drawn out more than just the neighbors? The tension in the air was thick, and I knew I was standing at the edge of something big. The mystery of what really happened with Karen, the sealed deck, and the unexpected police action wasn't over. In fact, it was only just beginning. And whatever came next could change everything about this quiet lakefront ranch and my life forever. Just when I thought the night couldn't get any stranger, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a video message from another neighbor, one who had been standing quietly at the edge of the crowd during the whole police visit. The clip showed something that made my stomach drop. Karen, just moments before the officers arrived. Slipping a small envelope under my front gate, I watched the video over and over. The envelope looked old and weathered, almost like it had been hidden somewhere for a long time. But what was inside it? And why would Karen, who had been so determined to call 911 on me, be leaving something at my door in secret. It felt like a completely different story was unfolding right before my eyes. Hey. And suddenly the sealed deck wasn't the only thing at the center of this mystery. Questions raced through my mind. Had Karen been trying to send me a warning, or was it some kind of trap? The fact that she'd been caught by the police moments after made me wonder if she was playing a much bigger game, one that involved secrets nobody else in the neighborhood knew about. As I stood there, debating whether to open the envelope, right away a knock came at the door. My heart skipped a beat. When I opened it, I found one of the officers from earlier standing there, looking serious. He said they'd found some unusual information during their check on Karen, something about her background that tied her to a long unsolved case in a nearby town. Suddenly, her aggressive behavior didn't seem random. Now, it wasn't just about an HOA dispute or a sealed deck. There was something deeper, darker, and more complicated at play. The calm lakefront community was hiding secrets, and I was right in the A.